Trickett MP, the floor is yours.
Thanks very much. It's a great privilege to be here and follow such fabulous speakers with more to come. Look, I think, let's just be clear. There are some who are saying that our policies were too radical under Jeremy Corbyn. They're saying that we lost the election because our manifesto was too left-wing. And this, I think, explains the repeated purges which have been launched against the left in recent months. Somehow they think that Labour can win by shifting our whole movement to the right, but they're wrong. And of course, we didn't get every single thing right, one of which perhaps was being too tolerant to those who thought it was okay for them to repeatedly attack our party leader, especially in the run-up to the general elections. But, and this is my central point, left policies and ideas are now more relevant than they ever were. How else could you explain the fact that the Tories haven't yet dared to launch a full-scale austerity attack on the public services, though it's coming? And why is it that they decided to use state power to borrow billions of pounds in order to introduce their furlough scheme? If you look carefully at the opinion polls, there are still significant majorities for all the radical ideas which Labour had in the run-up to the last two elections. So I remain optimistic about the future. I've said this before. Look at Labour's proposals in 2017, 2019. Of course we made mistakes, but we must learn from those, not to repeat them, but equally we shouldn't throw out the baby with the bathwater. After all, it was our transformative agenda which united the rank and file of the whole movement. It galvanised tens of thousands of people drawn into activism for the first time, and it inspired millions to come and vote for us. Proposals on universal public provision, whether it was broadband or care or education or railways. We sought to tackle the climate crisis. As we know, Labour plans to decarbonise the economy, modernise public transport, retrofit social housing. And all of this would require massive public investment and a progressive government prepared to act. And we didn't shrink away from any of that. We were willing to take the necessary steps to fund it. We would have tackled the obscene inequalities in income and wealth. We would have taxed the top 5% of earners and looked at taxing the billions of those who tax avoid in the corporations elsewhere. Meanwhile, we would not have sought to tax the poorest in society as the Tories are planning to do. But let's not be in any doubt. We are facing a full-scale Tory attack, both on our services and on working class living standards. We can see it happening this autumn in the coming weeks. The ending of furlough, withdrawal of universal credit, suspension of the pensions triple lock, the increase in national insurance, which we saw this week, real-term reductions in public sector pay. Let's call all of this what it is. It's the barbarism of a class war, but waged on behalf of the wealthiest against the rest of the country. It is barbarism in a country to see billionaires whose wealth is growing exponentially and yet millions of children left in poverty, where you have the cruelty, for example, of Grenfell and the victimisation of migrants and so many other minorities. But how could it be otherwise? After all, it's the wealthiest in our society who fund the Tories. They aren't subject to this assault, are they? Their income and their wealth continues to grow year on year. Labour now needs to fight all of this with a message of hope. And that hope has to be the promise of socialism. So let's say to our leadership, as I did in the Commons a few weeks ago, that they need to cast aside their timidity. They've been too focused on internal matters. The purges must end. The attacks on internal democracy, the command and control approach to local party meetings. They think we lost the election because of our policies, but if they want to explain what really happened, maybe they should start by taking a long, cold look in the mirror and ask themselves whether they helped or hindered us in the run-up to the election. So it's down to us, the left, to lead the argument in the Labour movement and to take it into the wider country where our ideas will be well received. And let me make one final point. Speaking to the left, to my colleagues on the left, let me say this. This is not a type of pessimism or for defeatism, for flaking away from the struggle. Nor should we be indulging in factionalism, competition or individualistic ways of operating. We need to unite in a collective fight for justice. After all, it's less than 2 years ago, we were the leadership of a movement for transformational change, the whole world watching, heading for an electoral contest where we would have gained government power. And look then, just this year, the two closely fought elections in unison, where we see again reasons for optimism. And I think we can be more radical than we were actually. We can be more populist, for example, in our economics. 4 thoughts come to mind. First, why has Labour so often limited itself to taxing income rather than wealth? If we're serious about tackling the inequities of capitalism, then we must surely be prepared to take on the overwhelming power of capital itself. And why is unearned income taxed less than earned income? Dividends earned from shares is a case in point, taxed less than wages earned. And then there is the ocean of money, lying unspent in the bank accounts of wealthy corporations. Last time I looked, there was almost £1 trillion unspent cash in corporate bank accounts. That should be mobilised for our people. And is it time once again to renationalise the Bank of England? Comrades, this is
1 minute, John.
I'm finishing. Comrades, this is one of the wealthiest countries in the world, but this wealth is in the hands of a few. Comrades, we can do this, but only if we use our intellects, if we radiate hope, and if we show that we can unify. Let's make it happen.